What are your thoughts overall? Obviously, you said yourself this is a complicated trial. It was snowing. There was a lot of people in the house that night. How complicated is this?
Well, the thing is, very few cases are like this. So many cases we see, it's like there's a ton of bad evidence against the person, and we're going to see if the criminal defense team can kind of knock some holes in it or get some doubts in there or something. But here, there's so many facts that side with the accused person, Karen Reed, that kind of counter the facts from the other side. So we almost have a kind of dueling facts, and I think that's one of the reasons why this has gotten such passion from the public, that so many people are weighing in and fighting about it. And there's television programs just dedicated to it every night. I mean, there's a reason why. It's not just one of those open and shut cases. We've had some big cases, obviously, in the area before. You can't get any bigger than, let's say, the Boston Marathon bomber case. And yet that's an example of the evidence was overwhelming. Everybody hated the person. And the community was not so passionately involved in taking sides in it the way this is, because there's so many facts coming in on both ends.
Mm-hmm. No, obviously, Reed is facing a second-degree murder charge, which is the highest of the charges she's facing. Do you think there's been enough evidence that, creates malice for the jury to find her guilty of second-degree murder?
We haven't heard one bit of information whatsoever that would show that she was guilty of second-degree murder, that this was an intentional murder. And the prosecution hasn't even shown anything yet. And every criminal defense attorney and prosecutor who I've spoken with is pretty much in unison that they think she was overcharged. At best, there could be a manslaughter charge, that perhaps there's an accidental hitting or something spur of the moment happened. But we've seen nothing that shows a real intent. And I don't believe the prosecution has ever mentioned anything that they have. It's obviously no one was around and saw this happen. So there's no evidence whatsoever that this was sort of an intentional thing with, as we call it legally, malice. So as far as the murder charge, that just seems to be, by all accounts, just overcharged. And haven't even seen the prosecutor try to back that up yet, although it's a long trial, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the prosecution is doing right so far?
Well, they're they've got many, many witnesses, and they're putting one after the other, recapping the events of that day, really to a fine-tooth comb of what happened beforehand, what happened after the body was found. They've kind of been laying out their case that way, and they've shown some things, that she was obviously on the site at the scene. She was hysterical. I think they finally had to medicate her and get her taken to a hospital. And she was saying things like, could I have done this? Could I have hit him? And then some people quoted her saying, I hit him. So that would be the strongest bit of evidence that the prosecution has come out with so far.
Do you think it's odd that jurors haven't really been shown any autopsy photos yet of John O'Keefe's body?
Yes, it's this case has been going on for more than 2 years, and we really haven't nailed down the cause of death. I understand there's experts on both sides. The prosecution is saying he got hit by a car. The defense is saying our experts say this is not consistent with being hit by a car, and supposedly the FBI and during a federal investigation was looking into this too. And it's been said that 3 experts there also said inconsistent with being hit by a car. There's no marks on his body. There's defensive wounds on his hands. There's all the cut marks. There's different sides of his head that were hit. Defense obviously is saying that it looks more like he was beaten up. But it is interesting that in a case like this, we haven't really even nailed down the cause of death. So many cases, it's like, yeah, we know how the person died, shot in the head. Now it's a question, do we have enough evidence to prove it against the defendant? But you're usually not at this point, not even at the point where you've established the cause of death yet.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Friday, Jennifer McCabe was on the stand. She was a big witness in this case, and she's going to be cross-examined tomorrow. The defense, telling reporters outside court that they're going to try to poke holes in her story. What do you think we can expect with that cross-examination tomorrow?
Well, we're all waiting to hear, because it's easy to have an examination, But the cross-examination afterwards is tougher. When the prosecution puts on their witness and the witness says everything that, the prosecution would like to hear and to back up the prosecution's case. And that's the easy part. But then when you're cross-examined by the defense, they can bring up all kinds of inconsistencies or facts and tear some holes in it. And as we've heard, the defense counsel, after the court was over with yesterday, said there were so many holes in her story that it's like a net. And so we're going to see that. I think everybody's anxious to see what the cross-examination is going to be tomorrow, because the defense has certainly promised that they're basically going to show that there's all kinds of holes in her testimony. And that's what they promised. And so we're going to all sit back and watch and see if the defense delivers the way that they say they will.
Mm-hmm. Seeing the Canton Police Department collected evidence with red Solo cups and Stop and Shop bags, do you think that puts any doubt in the minds of jurors when it comes to how this police investigation was handled?
Yes, it really brings up all kinds of reasonable doubt. That there's a bunch of issues where they say that the police work here was kind of shoddily done, that they didn't secure the crime scene, that they used a leaf blower over with the snow to kind of blow the crime scene apart, that they didn't sequester different witnesses, take them aside from each other, that the body was found outside of a house. They never even went in and did a search of the house, never interviewed people from the house. And some of the people who were interviewed by the police were interviewed 1.5 years to 2 years later. And so there's a great deal of criticism that there was very shoddy, unprofessional police work done here. And that certainly is going to raise a reasonable doubt in the minds of a jury. The defense is making great hay out of that they just say it was very slipshod, haphazard, and even what evidence they even gathered was not even secured properly and sealed in specially marked things. So the police really have fallen under fire. And particularly the other thing is the state trooper who was in charge of the investigation was friends or acquaintances with almost every single person in the house there. And so there's a great deal of criticism that he should have pulled himself out. This is Trooper Michael Proctor, that he should have withdrawn just for the appearance of impartiality. You can't go to a bunch of witnesses and you're good friends or your family's known them for a long time. Even Proctor's mother made a statement that she was that the people in the house were her second family. So why they had him in charge is just bad, just from the optics alone.
Now, we've heard a lot of some of the questions Assistant District Attorney Lally has been asking. He's, kind of been asking about what people did that night, what they were doing before. And sometimes some of the questions seem, almost a little bit irrelevant. Is there a reason why the prosecution is kind of asking all these questions about maybe what videos they watched that night, what they were doing leading up to the incident before they went to the house, that kind of thing?
It's hard to second guess what a attorney is doing in trial, because sometimes they'll ask some things that are seemingly irrelevant, and then it'll turn out down the line, we'll see, oh, that's what you were getting at. That's a major point. You were building it like building blocks. We do know that the juries, particularly on long trials, hate it when the trial is dragged out, when all kinds of questions are being asked, anything and everything, see what sticks. They kind of appreciate it much more if an attorney gets in there like a bullet, makes the points, asks the really important questions, then gets in and out. Otherwise, this jury could be sitting for 8 weeks. And if they think that it's just droning on and irrelevant questions are being asked, they could be very upset with whichever side is doing that.
Mm-hmm. The prosecution called Julie Nagel to the stand, and she was the first one or the only one to say she saw something that night. She described it as a blob and said she mentioned it to her friend. There was one other woman in the car that night that said that she heard her say that, but the other 2 adults, the McCabe's in the car, didn't, testify they heard that. What are your thoughts about that? The prosecution having this witness saying they saw something out there. How big of a deal is that? And does it need to be backed up by more than one person for the jury to believe it?
Well, yes, it would be important and helpful to the prosecution, that statement. And then when the defense cross-examined her, they say, have you ever told anybody this? Any police? Did you think it was worth mentioning to the prosecutor? This is the first we're hearing about it now while you're testifying about 2.5 years after it happened. So they're questioning that. And she said she saw a dark blob, but didn't think anything of it and didn't think it was worth mentioning to anybody. and she hadn't. So, and nobody else out of all the people coming in and out, nobody else saw anybody there. Even a plow driver driving by didn't see anything there. So there's a great deal of evidence on the other side, but that would certainly be helpful to the prosecution.
Mm-hmm. And no one, actually saw what happened that night so far. No one has testified that they saw what happened. A few witnesses have said they saw an SUV. How does that play into the case?
That would be a harder thing for the prosecution to get over. Nobody saw this happen, so nobody really knows what happened. It's kind of circumstantial evidence. Everybody's trying to piece together what could conceivably be happening. And as we know, the defense is saying there was no accident whatsoever at all. She never bumped into him at all. And the fact that nobody saw it would probably be helpful to them also. But the prosecution then is trying to kind of use their building blocks and try to put together evidence. Well, the vehicle was there, and we say that he never entered the house, so he must have been hit by the vehicle. So everybody's trying to piece it together, but it's kind of unusual that nobody really saw the death, and there's all kinds of theories, and we really haven't established yet, which is the bottom line, how he was killed. Well, one side saying he was backed into by a vehicle. The other thing is saying he was beaten up by people and basically beaten to death. And so none of that has been nailed down. And if there's a reasonable doubt in the jury's mind, if the jury walks away and says, I don't even really know what happened here. She could have hit him with a car. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Well, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And that would be enough to convict her.